Hello everyone, welcome to my session, Innovation and Trends in Flutter for Web. I'm Kamal. I'm a freelance project manager and a YouTuber. Today I'm going to be talking about Flutter for Web from a developer's point of view, the latest trend, and the core concept. And also we will see how Flutter for Mobile is different from Flutter for Web. And also I'm going to shed some light on the Flutter architecture. Well, my first few slides would be about the latest trends in Flutter and the architecture. So as a Flutter developer, when we are developing apps, we need to understand how from a single code base we are able to get the same look on the Flutter for Mobile and as well as on the Flutter for Web. So let's understand how is this possible. State management. It's another topic that cannot be ignored. Because when you're developing Flutter apps, definitely you need to manage your state of your app. So you need to follow one of the state management techniques. Next, moving on to the Flutter for Web package. It's important to know which package to use, when to use, and what are the details that you need to really look while choosing a package, whether it's compatible with Flutter for Web or mobile. And some UI showcase. I think as a Flutter developer, it's really important to know the latest statistics. Well, Google says around 2 million users are using Flutter UI framework for building apps, where 60% of them are on Windows, 27% on Mac, and 13% on Linux. And also, it's good to understand who your audience is, whether it could be developers working in enterprise, or it could be self-employed, or it could be a designer. So it's always good to have a better understanding of your target audience. Confirms that we had almost 50,000 Flutter apps built on the Play Store, with more than 3,000 pull requests and with over 231 contributors all over the world. Moving on to the first concept, which is the Flutter new version, which is the 1.17, which is the first stable release of 2020. We had almost 6,300 issues closed since 1.12 stable release. So that's a huge number of issues getting resolved. There was also Metal support for faster iOS performance. Now in a minute, I'll get back to you as to what this Metal support is all about. But then we also had new material component. We had the tracking tool as well. There was also the mobile performance and size improvement done in this version. Now, if you're looking for faster animations or smaller apps with lower memory utilization, this version definitely has a lot of work done and it has a lot of improvements done on it. Now, when I say Metal support to improve performance, now what is this Metal support? It is basically to improve the performance by 50% for iOS user. Now, it provides a direct access to the underlying GPU, thus making your Flutter apps run really fast. Now, you might ask me now, what about the devices that do not support Metal support? Then definitely there are versions like 10 or prior to 10, they render with the native speed. Next, we had an introduction of navigation rail widgets in this version, which actually offers a responsive app navigation model. So if you want to build great apps that can switch between mobile and desktop form factors, definitely this is a widget. Rather than designing your own custom widgets, you can go for navigation rail widget. Then we had another introduction of date picker with text selection overflow widget. This was also introduced in 1.17, which includes the new visual to match the updated material guidelines with the text. Then we had something called the motion specification. This actually defines 4 transition patterns that describes the animation between the component and the full screen view container. So it could be a transform, shared axis, fade through, and fade. Well, implementing these animations or these motions are really easy. You have to just drop them and you're good to go so that you can delight your user with cool animation effect. Next, we have something called the text and font, which always goes hand in hand. If you're excited about text scale implementation, then you're probably going to be using this new Google Fonts. So Google Fonts actually allows developers to easily experiment with and use any of the fonts. Use any of the fonts from Google Fonts in your app. Now, how easy it is. When the app is ready to publish, the developer then decides whether the user receives the font by downloading it from the API, or he could go with the pre-bundle with the app package. That's how easy it is to use Google Fonts in your Flutter application. Next, moving on to another interesting update that we had in this 1.7 version is the tooling, which is the Dart Dev tool. As you know, Dart is the language that is used to develop Flutter application. So my concern is the network tab, and which I'm really interested. So this actually shows the network traffic of your Flutter apps when you press the record button. So if you're from a web development background, you definitely have inspect element and you have a console network tab. So it gives you all the header information and your network related to the website. So similarly for Flutter applications, we have the Dart Dev tool and we have the network tab as well. Moving on to the Adobe XD. This was another cool feature which was introduced. For the first time, we have new Adobe XD plugin for exporting your prototype and getting a Flutter code. Now, how you can export your prototype into real code that you can use as a part of your mobile development. So you have your Adobe XD, either you can design or you can come up with a prototype PSD file, upload it. And then later, all you have to do is get the XD plugin to Flutter installed in your Adobe, and then select your Flutter project path and the folder in which you want all the widgets to be created, and the path of the image. In case if you have few images, you want these images to be downloaded in the Flutter project. So just mention the path and the name of the widgets. So the moment you do all these and click on export all widgets, you would have your widgets created in your Flutter application. But you need something more, which is the plugin. So you need to use the plugin details added in your pubspec file, and then you would have this generated file, which is automatic. Now, if I had to do from scratch this entire prototype, it would definitely take a day or two for me. But with this Adobe XD, all I have to do is just few clicks and install, and I'm good to go in 5 minutes if you're a first-time user. So that's how easy it is. Then moving on to the architecture. People do ask me whether should I start with Flutter Mobile and then switch to Flutter Web, or should I learn with Flutter Web and then Mobile? In my experience and my opinion, I would say start with Flutter for Mobile. Understand what a widget is, the architecture, what state management is, and then move on to the Flutter for Web. That way you would have a better understanding of the tool. We can also see that as a Flutter developer, you need to understand how is Flutter Mobile different from Flutter Web. Even though you write a single code base, you are able to run the application on both the platform. Now, how is this possible? So to understand this question, we need to understand the architecture. So the first picture is the Flutter for mobile architecture, and the second one is the Flutter for web. There is something very common in both these architecture, which is the green section. The framework remains the same. The only thing is the blue section. Is it that it's missing in the Flutter for web? Definitely not. The difference lies in the engine implementation. So if I have to analyze this code, it's like the Dart code. You write the code and then your Flutter web engine comes into the picture. It converts your Dart code into HTML, CSS, or Canvas, and then it goes through the Dart2.js compiler, which is the important and extra layer that's responsible for converting your Dart code to JavaScript and also runs your app at a faster speed. So that's the major difference. Next, moving on to state management, a very interesting topic and also a topic of discussion by a lot of developers as to which statement is the best. Now, as a Flutter developer, I would say that it is very important to understand this formula before we actually dive deep into state management. This function is a state. It's a function with state as the input and UI as the output. That is, whenever you try rebuilding your widget, you're actually calling this function so that you get your UI rebuilt. So if you understand this, your entire state management is around this. And we have several state management techniques, whether it could be block, MVC provider, we have MobX, we have scope model, we have Redux, and we have a very new state management added to the list, which is the RiverPod, which is a provider but different. So I would say it's like it allows you to read providers while guaranteeing compile safety. So if you would like to know more about RiverPod, you would find a link in the references section, or you could just find out Flutter RiverPod and you would find more details about it. So if you ask me, Kamal, what is the best state management? How do I choose one? I always cite with an example. If I go to an ice cream salon and if I want to try something, how would I know which flavor is good? So all I do is try a particular flavor, see if I like it, and then I go for it. So similar way, state management is something that you have to try, see if it abides by a project, or if it suits your project, or if you're comfortable with it, or if it matches your requirement, then go for it. So there is no good or bad state management. It's totally up to your project requirement. In a nutshell, if I have to tell, taste it. Try all the state management, see which one works for you, analyze it, whether this suits your project, and then start using it. So there is no good or bad state management. Say what are the things that you need to keep in your mind while actually choosing a state management is understand your requirement, understand the client's requirement, understand the target audience, understand your project requirements, then see if it matches with the goal and your expectation. Say for example, I have a very simple app. I don't have to go for a complicated block state management, or I don't have to go for a provider or MobX. If my project is really complex, then definitely I would go for it. Because if I'm trying to work on a small app, and if I'm trying to use something complicated, in fact, the boilerplate used in the state management itself would be dominating with my code. So rather choose a simple state as per your project requirement. And also there is something called style. Say if you're pretty comfortable with block, but your project requires you to work on provider, then you have to work on it. You can't say, I'm comfortable with block and I would like to go for it. So understand your requirements and then work on it. Flutter packages, another interesting topic, because we use day in and day out with packages, whether it could be Google Charts, or it could be a HTTP request, or it could be some kind of sessions or images, anything. We always depend on third-party packages. Now, if I have to choose packages, we have several packages available to implement our Flutter applications. So which one to choose? If I say chart, I have hundreds of packages lined up in the pub.dev website. Now, which one to choose for it? Definitely, there are certain rules and there are certain points that you need to look while choosing a package. So few such properties are build status, version, score. So in a moment, I'll show you all these features in the website that you really need to look for it. So compatible, author, GitHub repository, installation, and example. So if I go to pub.dev and if I look for a particular package, this is what I would be given with. So there's something called score. Now the maximum score for a package, so every package updated on the pub.dev would be given a score depending on the overall performance, quality, number of issues closed. So if you find something 100, that means that's the best package that you can blindly use it. Then we have something called Flutter, Android, iOS, Web. This actually tells us if your package is compatible with all these versions. There would be packages which is not compatible with web. And say, for example, if you're using the app in future for web, then you have to look for a different package. So always look for these details, the versioning, and also the repository. Since you know that Flutter is open source, you can see how this package was developed, who developed it, what are the open issues, and what are the closed issues. And also you have the versioning details, which version, which issue was fixed, and the installation and the example. It also gives you the details of the process that you need to follow while installing a package. So it's very important to have a good understanding of packages before you choose them. And here are a couple of my Flutter web projects that I've built. So this is a very simple project with 3 grid structure. So all I did was I wrote the code in Flutter for mobile and then just added few code changes, which is like the responsive. If it's the screen size is certain width, I want 2 blocks. If it is the large, I want 3 blocks. So that was the only change I did, so that I was able to get the same look and feel or the same code used from Flutter for mobile to Flutter for web. So that's how you can use a single code base in Flutter. This is one such example. And there's this another cool dashboard that I created, which is also responsive, which is the 4, 3, and 2 grid structure. So as and when it's responsive, the number of blocks reduces. And also we could build the portfolio pages, and you would find all these links in the references. And there is also Flutter GitHub IO sample, so you would find all your Flutter for web projects. And this is also another cool project developed by the Flutter team. So you can find tons of projects, and if you would like to upload some, you can do. And we do have DARTPAD with Flutter, so you don't have to install any IDE to start working on Flutter. You have DARTPAD, you have CodePen. So here's some cool features developed by the Google developers, the Google Developer Expert and the Flutter community. Here also you can see that they have used DARTPAD to develop this kind of amazing UIs, and they have not used any fancy packages or third-party plugins. It's a simple material.dart, and they were able to achieve these design. So I will leave a link of all these projects in the reference so you can have a look into it and see how they had come up with these designs and what they really did to get this look. And you can find the references. So whatever I've been talking about, the DARTPAD, the RiverPod, you can find all these details here. So I'm just going to keep this section for 30 seconds so that you can have a look into it, or if you would like to take a screenshot, you can do as well. And then we have something called community, because Flutter is all about community, where the entire project is open source. We have this driven by community. We have every week we have session by the Flutter developers and the GTEs. And there is a community called Flutterista, where it's purely a community driven to identify as women and who are interested in Flutter SDK. So we have a monthly meeting, and if you have any project that you would like to discuss about Flutter, or you have any issues or any concerns that you'd like to raise, and definitely you have teams working on it. So to join, all you have to do is, we have Daniel and Stephanie actually organizing this Flutterista. So if you'd like to join, you're very much welcome. Just tweet these people and they will add you to the Slack group, and you have amazing community contributions happening. So, and if you have any questions, you can get back to me as well. And yeah, thank you so much. That's it. So I think today, by the end of this session, you would have got what are the latest innovations and trends that you could find in Flutter and use efficiently in your Flutter development, and also understand how Flutter for web and Flutter for mobile architecture is different, or is it the same, or what makes it really predominant and outstanding with the single code base, and how to choose the packages, the state management, the requirements, and also how to be a part of this community. Thank you so much for your time.
We have about 9 minutes until our last talk before the closing remarks. So top off your drinks, stretch your legs, wander around, and we will see you in just a bit at 3:30 Mountain Time.